What is up? It's your boy jonni.shreve. I have BB Promo to tell like it is, guys. Welcome back to an episode of Coaching Up. Today, guys, we're going to review another video of Athleanx, and this one is tricep exercises ranked best to worst. And I'm going to go over some of the movements he does and give you guys some better alternative and options and just better cues or different cues that I would give into making some of these movements more optimal, the ones that I feel like they should, and then leaving the ones that the way they are or should be in the list where they are and should be. So anyway, without further ado, guys, let's get after it right now and let's go.
What's up, guys? Jess Cavaliere, Athleanx.com. What you see behind me is a bunch of different tricep exercises. However, after today's video, you're gonna wanna get rid of a few of them. So I'm gonna help you to rank them from the worst to the best so that you're left with only the best tricep exercises that are gonna deliver the gains that you're after. So as we begin our ranking process here, it's important to qualify what goes into the ranking because there's many factors and they all sort of weight differently.
So I like how in this video, different than before, is like how he's actually giving like a ranking system. How does he put these exercises in the position he does, and what makes a exercise either good or bad? Number one, is it gonna give you enough of a load? Is it gonna actually hit the muscle that you're actually targeting? Majority, right? Remember the whole pie chart thing, make sure like 80% of your pie chart is hitting the muscle that you're actually trying to target. And then three, is it safe? So that should be number one. Either way, I know he's not putting those in like best to worst in what should be the ranking system, but those are three really good things you should really think about when it comes to, exercise selection. So let's go.
And so we're gonna start the list as we always do from the bottom up. Yeah, I get it. I know what the title is. It's best to worst, but it's my video. And so we start off at the bottom of the triceps barrel here with our first exercise, the standing dumbbell power bomb. Now somebody might know this exercise as the standing overhead dumbbell extension. The fact is, it is not one of my favorites, and there's an alternative that I will show you later that is definitely better than this.
And
what
yes,
I don't like about this move is that you have two things going on here. Number one, the position of the shoulder to even perform the exercise.
So obviously with this one here, I don't like it at all. I'm not a big fan of doing anything behind the head unless you're in like a snatch grip position. Really, that's it. And when you're in that position, you're actually targeting more shoulders than anything else. So when it comes to this exercise, I'm not a fan of doing any kind of tricep movement behind the head. I have shoulder problems. A lot of people have shoulder problems, and people's shoulders aren't that strong. So again, you're gonna have internal rotation, you're gonna be behind your head, and you're gonna be trying to dodge your head. So you gotta really kind of like move your neck around and do the movement where you're like, you're trying to do this kind of shit. So yeah, I definitely agree. That movement should be at the bottom of the list as one of the movements that are not good.
For that reason, it gets the first big red X. Which brings us to our second exercise here in the worst category, and it's the cross-face tricep extension. Now, ever since I first saw this exercise in Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding and actually tried it many years ago, my hate for the exercise actually has only grown. It comes down once again to the position of the body in performing the exercise.
Yeah, so again, remember, you're trying to actually like target your muscle. You want to actually target the muscle and then make sure the other muscles around to help, stabilize and isolate the movement, the muscle that you're trying to hit, not take away from it. So for me, like I have shoulder problems, I have, rotator group problems. So when it comes to stabilization, being in this position puts me in a vulnerable position where at the end of my rep or closer to, getting to those failing reps, I can't necessarily keep myself in a position to actually keep pulling out. My shoulder will start to rise up and pile up, and I really, really have to focus on shoulder depression to keep it down. So I definitely agree. There's other positions you can be in to isolate your triceps where you don't have to do cross body this, over behind the back, this or that. You can just find a position to put yourself into where you can have full elbow extension and keep yourself in a position to hit that muscle hard without being in some wonky position to take away from the movement. So that's another movement I definitely agree with Athleanx. We're 2 for 2. Shit's changing.
And that brings us to our third and final exercise in the worst category here. And for this, my sights are set squarely on the bench dip. And this is an exercise I've covered many times before, and I just recently did so again in an appearance on Live with Kelly and Ryan. And it's simply the fact that the exercise may be of good intention, but oftentimes bad execution.
Yes, so this is one of those movements where I see people try and do bench dips all the time to do it wrong. When it comes to like, physiotherapy and whatnot, when you're, say you have like, bicep tendon issues, or he's talking about the head of the humerus and whatnot, when it comes to your bicep tendon, you want to have your hand in a position where it's turned around, right? So you give yourself a lot more room in that shoulder cap to move around. So what I recommend if you're gonna do bench dips, best way to do this if you want to try it out is do it on a bar. Now, make sure you take your bar and put it into your rack and make sure it's secure and safe. You can put in holders. I have it here just sitting on the safety pins here, but if you can see right here how I have it this way And then what I like to do is I will basically have my hands turn this way. Now again, when we're talking about having bicep tendon issues, a good stretch is literally having your hands back like this and then kind of falling down like this to kind of stretch that shoulder out. But when it comes to doing this movement, to make it a little more optimal than having your hand this way, turn your hands around, you got a little more free motion. So from here and pushing up. And you get a good stretch from there. Again, it's not the best movement ever to do, but if you're gonna do it and mess up, you might as well mess up and do it right. So again, flip your hands around, have your palms facing out, being in like more of a supinate position, and then go from here and then do the actual movement down and up. Then having your hands this way, and then seeing your shoulder in that anterior rotation, smash down your shoulder. So that's the best way you can do that movement. To make it a little more optimal is do it from the actual bar itself. Give you a little more free range. All right, let's go. Next movement.
And with that, I get to break out my blue marker as we move our way up the rankings into the better category. And the first exercise we're going to take a look at here is the rope push away or the tricep push away. Now this is a good exercise. However, it's the physics of the exercise that kind of take it down a couple notches. We know that in order to keep the tension high on a muscle, you want to have that line of resistance perpendicular to the moving segment if we can. In this case, our forearm is where we're targeting. And the line of resistance is the cable itself. And you can see that when we get to the bottom of the exercise, those two are almost parallel to each other, meaning we don't have a lot of resistance on the triceps in the peak contracted state. On top of it, this tends to be one of those momentum exercises. A lot of times we'll get our lats involved, we'll get our core involved, get a little bit of forward leaning involved.
Okay, I'm gonna stop right there. So yes, this movement is going into the better category as better than the last ones, but there's also some mechanical issues when it comes to this. So I don't know if Athleanx is simply exaggerating the momentum and the moving of this exercise, but if I'm gonna do that movement, I'm gonna want to have myself in a position where I'm leaning over more, my core is engaged, and I'm hinging here at the hips, locking myself in so I don't get any movement here. Again, when we're trying to isolate a movement, in this case, triceps, you're gonna make sure the torso, basically from the shoulder cap, from here all to the ground, is stiff as a board. So basically like a plank. So you wanna make sure you're almost like in a plank position, leaning over, and this will be your leverage. There's nothing wrong with having your core involved in any movement at all. It should be. It's gonna give you a lot more emphasis on engaging your core, and then again, it's gonna give you a lot more power when it comes to actually output when you're doing each exercise. So again, from the side, I look like this, and I'm in this position here. From the front, my shoulders are square and down and depressed, and then I'm pressing over in here while my core is engaged. So the only thing moving should be the extension of my elbows. So you don't want to be doing this, which he's basically doing, and I think he's just doing that just to kind of like make a point, and people doing showing a little too much momentum. But for me, what I'm gonna show you guys is how to keep away from momentum. So remember, keep yourself over the weight. You're gonna hinge down a bit from the waist. Keep your shoulders depressed and down, and then pulling over. And then you want to keep that line of resistance continuous by having yourself bent more. Now, if I'm straight up like this, yeah, there's nothing here anymore. But I'm down a bit like this, when I'm pulling, there's still resistance pulling me back. Now, I'm using a band just to kind of show you guys. But again, that's how you want to have that done there, guys. So I do agree that this is a better exercise than the last three that he had there. But to make this more optimal, take the cues that I just said.
Which puts us to the second exercise in the better category, and this is a good exercise once again, but in its most basic form here, it has some limitations, and we're talking about the tricep pushdown. And whether you perform this with a straight bar or a rope, the limitations are still the same. We're talking once again about the physics of the movement, not lining up and giving us the most we can get out of the exercise, especially considering the fact that I'm going to show you a variation you could do later on that will. Not to mention, elbow position matters here. As the elbows start to flare more and more out to the side, as they are on any type of overhand push down, you're going to start to involve other muscles, particularly the chest, which is going to take some of the effort away from the triceps and limit the growth that you're seeking there.
So I'm gonna stop right there. So when I'm actually watching him do the movement, yes, the elbow position does matter in flaring out, but it also does matter in placing on where the elbow is in proximity to where your core is. So if you want to make something very easy, the closer you are to your midline will be the easiest version of that lift. The further away from this your midline, the harder it will be. So when we're doing this movement, what we want to do is we want to make sure that our elbows aren't sitting here, because again, it's gonna be a lot much easier to pull down, and then again, range of motion is not gonna be as great. So we wanna be in a position where we're here, and I want my elbows to be not here, but I wanna push my elbows down and out. There's already tension there on my elbows, so when I pull down, I have tension on my elbows. Again, I don't want my elbows to be doing this or my shoulders to kind of come up and down. I want shoulder depression. Shoulder depression, core engagement is gonna keep our torso stiff as a board. Again, we wanna make sure that our body emulates basically a plank in most positions. So if we keep our core engaged and our lats depressed, we're not gonna have any movement here or here, and we can emphasize that tricep extension or that elbow extension even more and have more emphasis on the load by having the elbow pushed out more from here instead of having it back here and trying to just push down this way. So that's another way you can actually make that movement that much better. Okay, let's move on.
And that brings us to the third and final exercise in our better category here, and we're talking about our next bodyweight exercise. It's the diamond cutter push-up. And if you watched my video on the chest rankings, you saw that I placed the basic push-up in the same very spot. Why? For the very same reason. The ease of execution, the fact that there's a lack of stimulus here if you could do too many of these. Guys, if these are standalone exercises, they're not going to provide the hypertrophy stimulus that you're looking for, which is one of the main criteria that I placed in this exercise ranking from the very beginning.
So I'm going to disagree a little bit. Now I'm like, I'm really reaching here, but I'm just gonna say this. For the majority when it comes to like the movement, is it just gonna target that muscle group? Can you put a load enough to build muscle hypertrophy in the group and the safety of it? Push-ups, diamond cutter push-ups or close grip push-ups would be lower on the list than tricep push-downs or your basic rope extensions, because more people can do tricep push-downs than they can do push-ups. Remember, we're looking at this from a beginner standpoint. Yes, I can do a bunch of push-ups, or someone who's advanced or intermediate can definitely do a bunch of push-ups. But when it comes to somebody who's trying to like build muscle from the jump, most people can't do push-ups that well. So when it comes to like isolating your triceps, let's get in a position that we can, and I think that the push-up should have been the first of that blue list and not the top of that blue list. If you're a beginner, how many push-ups can you do? Tricep push-ups, not that many. If you're a beginner, how many rope push-downs or tricep extensions can you do from the cable? A lot more, and you can load the weight more. So you can actually build from that standpoint. And then once you're strong enough there, you can move on. Remember, you wanna progress. Progressive overload doesn't mean that you gotta start from the basic of the movement itself, but progressive overload is being able to go from a position where you can build and then move on. So someone who is a beginner can go from a machine tricep movement, and then when they're strong enough, they can move on to actually doing push-ups. Again, I'm reaching a little bit more there. I still agree with where those are in the list from worst to best, but just for those who are out there, I just think diamond cutter push-ups would be a lot harder for most people, and you wouldn't be able to load it up as much, and then it's not as safe for most people. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, let's keep going.
If you can bang out 30 or 40 diamond cutter push-ups, or even 25, you're simply not being challenged enough in this exercise to get the gains that you're looking for from it, when we know that there are other variations of the same push-up exercise that are much more difficult and more challenging.
Yeah, most beginners are not doing 25, 30 damn push-ups. They're doing like 10, maybe. Anyway, let's move on.
And the first exercise here is, guess what? Another push-up. It's the Cobra push-up. And here I get a chance to explain exactly why I prefer this. I mentioned in the last exercise that with the diamond cutter push-up, the arms were maintained in position out in front of the body.
Okay, so here's where Athleanx just loses me. Number one, who's the audience he's talking to? Let's just say he's talking to the advanced and the elite. I'm not doing Cobra push-ups over tricep extensions. And the ones from the blue category were way better than this. Diamond cutter push-ups are better than Cobra push-ups. No one's doing these. No one's doing them, sorry. And when it comes to push-ups, regular push-ups are better than these. So he's lost me. He's in the best category, and this is what he has as the better movement. And we're looking at the parameters of how he ranks him as being number one, is gonna give you enough of a load. 2 is gonna isolate the muscle that's targeted, in this case, triceps. And 3, safety. And so if you are an elite athlete like myself, these are too easy. If you're a beginner, these are too hard and easily done to hurt yourself. Very. So I gotta disagree.
The Cobra push-up fixes that. You can see that we place ourselves a little bit more forward and we're finishing in a position with the arms tightly tucked to our sides and more into extension relative to our torso.
Now, Athleanx is lean, and I'm about to do the Cobra push-ups, and I don't see his tricep really flaring off as much as I see his erectors, his anterior shoulder, his back. I'm seeing more muscles moving around to do this movement than I'm seeing the tricep doing really anything. Even though it's actually being moved in this position, it's not being isolated enough for it to actually be a movement that should be at the top of the list. So you lost me, Athleanx.
Contraction. The second thing it does is it actually takes a little bit of the chest out of the equation. So instead of dominating with the chest, we're going to place the brunt of the move on the triceps, which is going to make it a more demanding tricep exercise.
Unfortunately, when you're in a push-up position, it doesn't matter how you look at it. A push-up in any case, whether it be a Cobra push-up, diamond push-up, whatever push-up, it's a variation of a plank. And a plank is going to hit your chest and mostly your core. So like, you're not really taking out the chest. Doing this movement more so than anything, you're gonna hit your chest because you're starting from the low and going to the high, doing this movement. I'm gonna get away from this because we're hanging too much on doing Cobra push-ups. So I'm gonna go move past this.
And so while we're talking about improvements of exercises, making them better exercises, let's move on to that next version of the tricep pushdown. It's the reverse grip pushdown because we're talking about a better exercise. Why? Even though you have to use potentially a little less weight here, the end effect of what's happening with the triceps is going to increase the effectiveness of the exercise. And that's because what the reverse grip provides us is a...
Okay, so I want you guys to look, and I get my editor to pop this up in the corner here, but let's just watch when he's doing this movement. Now again, the parameters are, 1 is gonna give us enough of a load to actually create hypertrophy to actually build the muscle. 2 is it gonna hit or target the muscle that we are trying to isolate, in this case, triceps. And 3, safety. And I'm looking at this and how he's performing it, and even from the back, let's start from the beginning, his traps are engaged. His shoulders are doing this at the very end. His erectors are just on, like everything is moving here. The triceps is still getting hit, but again, just the way he's actually demonstrating it, he's bringing in every other muscle to make this thing work. And I'm watching all those other muscles not sit in a static position, but they're isometrically being moved around to help aid that movement. So you're taking away from that movement. I'm not a fan of doing supinated or reverse grip tricep pull downs at all. It's gonna hit that tricep a lot more and a lot more of the 3 heads for sure. But when it comes to this, if I'm gonna do a reverse push down, I want to be in a position where I am again going to be in a place where my elbow is pushed out in front of me so I can isolate it more. And again, when we're doing tricep push downs in any sort, you want to take that elbow and push it down to the floor. That's going to cause that shoulder depression so we can keep our torso engaged and our core engaged so we don't have any movement here at all. We don't want CT or L spine flexion or extension at all. You want it to be in a what? Plank position again, so we can isolate our triceps. So when we're sitting here doing this movement, what we want to do is we want to be in a position where we're here and elbows are pushed down and in front. So when I pull down, I get to have just isolation on my tricep. Nothing else is moving. I don't want to see this and all this. And bro, look at me moving everything to get this movement done. I want to isolate the tricep. Now, when we're doing this, I recommend if you're gonna do this movement, that you use an easy bar. Or if you have handles that you can isolate and move them so you're not sitting in this position, because most of the time when it comes to being in a supinated position, most people are not comfortable or have enough mobility in their wrists to be fully supinated and pulling down like this. So again, if you do this movement, you use an easy bar so you can have a little more ease on that supinated position, being in that underhand grip, supinated being like this. And then again, taking the elbows and pushing them out to create tension already, making sure we are engaging our lats from shoulder depression and our core, so we have that really good stiff neutral spine being in a standing plank position. Let's move on.
And let's keep rolling here with the exercise improvements, because we talked about the tricep push away. Do we have something that's better than that? Or in this category, better still? And we do. It's the overhead rope extension. See, the setup is the same, the machine is the same, but the performance of the exercise is entirely different. Instead of targeting some point out in front of you,
No. Okay, so man, listen, I'm a fan. I root for people. Some people might be like, you don't like, there's no way you like Athleanx. I don't know who Athleanx is. I don't know who he is as a person. I can only judge the stuff that he puts out. And when I look at this and I'm like, we're starting off with a good note here. I'm really agreeing with this guy. He knows what he's talking about. The first two exercises, those are not good exercises to do. Perfect. You know what? Next ones, they're a little, scrambled the wrong way, but I agree with those ones too. But the ones that he has as the ones that are the best are not better than the blue ones. I don't care if you're in overhead position with this. It's not a good movement to do to fully be able to do the three things that he said to do in the first place. 1, are you in a position that's gonna be great enough to create hypertrophy? 2, is it gonna hit the muscle more than anything else? In this case, triceps. 3, safety. No, none of this is. If you're gonna do an overhead tricep extension, I would recommend doing it in a seated position where you put the cable up a little higher, where you can actually have yourself from here and pulling up with the cables. I don't recommend doing like this, but I also don't agree with his top 3 being better than his middle 3. They're not. They're not consistent to what he's saying, the parameters of what the ranking parameters are. I don't think this top 3, any of those movements that all that he said were better than the middle 3. So no, I gotta say, I don't agree with this list. If anything, it should have been the first 3, totally agree. The last 3 should be in the middle, and the middle should be at the top. That's how it should be, period. That's all I'm gonna say on this. I'm gonna stop right there. Be pretty sure he's gonna give out some more tips on how to make these movements, whatever, but he completely lost me at the very end with the top 3 being where they were in position and being ranked best to worst. It's scrambled up, unfortunately. But for the majority of the video is good, because it's gonna give you guys ideas of things that you guys are probably doing that you just stopped doing in the first place. But if you're gonna take anything away from this at all, number 1, is the load gonna be big enough to create hypertrophy? Okay, cool. How do we do that? What we're gonna do is elbow positioning. The further away your elbow is from your midline, the harder that movement's gonna be. So you don't have to load the weight up at all. For the most part, all you gotta do is, instead of taking your elbow from here, pull your elbow to here. Now, then again, after that, what we wanna do is make sure we have a neutral spine the entire time. We don't want our C, T, and L spine to be flexion or extension. We want it to be stiff as a board. We want to create ourselves to be like in a plank position the entire time, so we can isolate our tricep. So being in that plank position where we don't have any movement from here, where we're stiffer here, we are getting a more bang for our buck by having our core engaged the whole time. There's nothing wrong with your core being engaged at all. For the most part, people need to be engaged in their core more anyway. What the core is gonna do, coupled with shoulder depression, is going to keep your torso completely straight, your neutral spine. So again, you want to optimize tricep extensions, tricep movements from an elbow extension position. We want to be in that plank position, shoulder depression, elbow out this way, and then pulling or pushing down with whatever movement we're doing when it comes to triceps. And that's going to help isolate the tricep that much more. Anyway, guys, hope you guys liked the video, guys. I'm going to stop right there. If you did, guys, make sure you guys like, subscribe, and share this video, guys. You know I'm coming with a telegraph, transparent, vulnerable truth. For coaching, guys, jonni.shreve.com. I do coaching throughout the week with my athletes. Not only do we do check-ins once a week or every other week, I coach you guys up throughout the week. You guys send me videos, and I correct your form. That's what the ongoing coaching plan does. So I recommend, if you want that, a little more attention to detail on your form and getting better that way. If you want to know more about the coaching, sign up for a phone consult, 15 to 30 minutes. At the end of that consult, guys, if you want to go with coaching, whether it's a one-time plan or a recurring plan, I deduct the consult off of any package that you pick. Guys, use my code Johnny15 for 50% off the Power 30 cookbook. Use my code Johnny for 50% off fitarmy.com. Guys, add me on Instagram, _JohnShreve_. Make sure you guys send me your progress pics, video clips, foodie pics, whatever it is, guys. I'll repost it for you guys. You know how it is. Iron sharpens iron, progressive overload your life. In the meantime, keep dream chasing. Peace.